Political Capital is brought to you by Uber Canada. Learn how Uber and Mad Canada are reducing impaired driving at uber.com/home soon.
CHEK Podcasts.
Hey everyone, and welcome to Political Capital, your source for all the latest in BC politics. I'm your host, Rob Shaw. Lots going on in BC politics this week. We're going to check in on the BC Green leadership race. There's a couple candidates there. We have some issues popping up with electric vehicle mandates federally and provincially, and also some supportive housing reviews launched by the government this week. To break it all down, we're going to bring in the panel this week. Jeff is off, but we have Jillian Oliver, Allie Blades here. Like always, they are going to walk us through all of this, starting with the Greens. Jillian, we're going to come to you first on this because you are working on one of the two new Green leadership campaigns that have launched this week, with the kind of context here that the Greens are in the middle of this leadership race. It's been very low profile. They had, I think, a candidate cutoff of mid-June. We're starting to see the names come out now. There's a membership deadline in early August and then a vote in September. But tell us a bit. You're on the Jonathan Kerr campaign. Tell us a bit about him and what he's bringing to the race.
Yeah, so Jonathan is a counselor in Comox and also the vice chair of the regional district up there. And he's also a family doctor. I really was excited to work on his campaign when I met him because he's very energetic, very positive, and I think he really has the leadership qualities needed to sort of grow the party and appeal, widely to lots of different groups of people. And I think is at a place in his life where he's really excited to travel the province and really do that building work that I think is really important. And I think that's going to be the job of the next leader. They're going to be outside of the legislature, not an MLA, so they can really focus on that sort of external party work that has been hard for previous leaders who are also doing their MLA jobs in the House, to focus on both. So I think it's going to be an exciting race. Right now, there's two candidates out, and there's a couple more that are going to announce. And I think, it's good that there's going to be a race with a few different options so that the party can really have a debate about its future and also just show that there's a lot of, different people that are excited about building the party and its potential to grow and be a bigger influence in BC politics.
Yeah, there's only two, but as you mentioned, there should be more coming. But the other candidate who launched this week, Emily Lowen, who is a 24-year-old climate justice organizer from the Climate Action Network Canada, formerly UVic's student union director of campaign. She had put a platform out that talks a bit about focusing on Indigenous-led resistance to natural resource projects, LNG, attacks on the richest corporations, more strict environmental targets, and that type of thing. Seems like, Allie, we have, at least at the beginning here, a kind of what I would say Lowen is maybe more of a part of what we would think the Greens might do in a leadership race, very hard on environmental issues, versus the candidate that Jillian is talking about here, Jonathan Kerr, who's a doctor. Seems like he's bringing some ideas to grow the party. I'm just wondering about that early dynamic that you see there.
It's a very interesting one. I mean, you forgot the "Fight the Oligarchs." That's her main slogan. It's very interesting because with Lowen, you see this young woman who has potentially been part of the party for a long time. Like, she would be like the natural type of person that would be drawn to the Green Party and all that they stand for. And so there is a space for her. And then with someone like the other candidate who's also has elected experience, which for some people and for some members is an important thing. They want to know that the members want to know that they understand what it takes, what the schedule demands, and electability, which one can prove that, yes, they have that experience. And the other is, can you give me the chance to do it? Because I do have organizational experience. I have done some really significant things in her young 24 years. And so I think there's a space for both. And it's going to be interesting as to, leadership races are how many people can you get signed up and or persuade to go vote for you. And in this case, I think where Lowen's strategy to win is that she would need to bring in those members. But potentially for the other three, it's the pool of the existing members in a persuasion campaign, which is run completely different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that brings us to the kind of the interesting dynamic of the campaign, because Allie, you're spot on there. Like one of the IG posts from Lowen has already said she needs maybe 5,000 members to win this race, which is kind of roughly what the Green membership is already, Jillian. So it feels like that's as Allie put it, a campaign about bringing people in. And we've talked in the past about the pros and cons that can occur in that situation in a leadership race. The NDP faced it with Angelia Padarai and this kind of mass influx of new members that threatened to kind of overwhelm the existing membership base. Do you see that being an issue for the Greens, and the pros and cons of bringing in new members versus kind of the idea of sort of almost taking over the party?
Yeah, I think it can be like membership races can be really exciting as a chance to sort of reinvigorate the party, bring new people in, and grow it, and hopefully also invigorate and train new organizers that can then bring those skills to a provincial election. But I think it really comes down to the sort of issues, differences that emerge between the two candidates. If it really does become a really strong distinction there. I think, in this case, Jonathan Kerr also has environmental bona fides. He's on the watershed board up in Comox and has worked on lots of green campaigns before as well. So I think, even if another candidate brings in new members, all candidates still get those lists and can still appeal to those members. And I think ideally you sort of make an argument that there's room for everybody in the party in the next provincial election, and it comes out that way. Of course, it doesn't always turn out that way, like we saw with the NDP campaign. I would argue that there was more stark differences in the platforms between those two candidates, between Evie and Apadarai, but it's still early days for this race, so we'll see how it all shapes up.
Allie, the Greens' popular vote kind of fell in half in the last election. How does a leadership race like this, which could bring in new members, and also maybe a leader who is not going to have a seat in the legislature, how does that help or address the issue, do you think, of the sort of declining Green vote, or is it a challenge for the party?
There's pros and cons, and I don't wish this upon the Greens because it's a very difficult dynamic to manage, of having a leader of the party on the outside of the legislature and then a leader within the dynamics of government, essentially, that one may not have control of the other. And so if the narrative, if the comms are different, then it really presents a problem for the party overall in the next election. If they're successful in kind of coalescing the narrative of the party and the two representatives in the legislature, brilliant. Now we're cooking. But what it means that the leader, because it looks like it's going to be someone from the outside, is that the focus could very well set them up for success in all they're doing for the next few years is finding more members, finding that money. And then to the last time, the Greens didn't put candidates in every single riding. And so what this means is that this person could very well be that person to go find all of the candidates, build those riding associations so that they're fully prepared with candidates, campaign plans, and a little bit of a runway to start campaigning now, while the other leaders, the premier and the leader of the official opposition, and let's not forget the other party, they would be stuck within the confines of being in the legislature. Meanwhile, the Green leader can now just be zigzagging across the province, which would be a wonderful thing. That does require money, though. So if they are, maybe the test for the next leader is who can bring in the most money. Who are we confident that can recruit those high caliber candidates, as well as bring in the money for campaigns? Because we've talked about this a million times, how expensive that is.
Mm-hmm. No, it's a great point that because of how slim the vote is in the legislature, everyone is stuck there for every single vote. So you have these wide swaths of the year where no one can travel around the province, the other party leaders. And Jillian, I thought it was interesting that one of Kerr's first moves was to actually go to Prince George and start up there, where the Greens, I think, got like 8% of the vote in Prince George Mackenzie. It's not one of the ridings that in an election we talk about being winnable for the Greens, but it looks like his strategy is to canvass kind of the whole province and not just the little pockets in Metro Vancouver and on the island where you would typically kind of expect maybe the Greens to focus.
Yeah, I think that central to Jonathan's campaign is going to be his ability to appeal widely to lots of different people. Being an elected councillor in Comox, he was the top vote getter locally in a riding, where the Greens are somewhat competitive, but that is very diverse in terms of where people are on the political spectrum. So to really show that he can appeal to a wide range of people, to connect with people directly on issues, and show that he also has experience delivering on those issues as a local councillor. And there are lots of places in the province where, although the Greens may not be really strong vote getters, they can be strong areas for volunteers who can work remotely on different campaigns, or for the provincial campaign. They can be strong areas for fundraising, and they can be areas to kind of propagate for future growth as well. So definitely looking at a provincial strategy for his campaign, and really kind of showing that the Greens are ready to compete outside of their traditional areas.
And Allie, just to go back to you and the kind of last question here, it feels like to me, every time there is a leadership race in a political party, there is some sort of weird scandal that pops out about PIN numbers and who got emails here and how. And then the question becomes, at the end of the leadership race, can you bring everyone back together and coalesce as a team, especially when your different candidates are running on sort of different ends of a party's spectrum? Is there any worry that you would have for the Greens in that? We don't know. I'm not entirely sure how they're running their leadership vote day and if there'll be any controversies, but it just seems like this day and age, there's always a controversy on that. And then the party's got to try to coalesce together again.
Yeah, the mechanics of how a leadership race and the vote works, there's always going to be criticism about any option that you provide. I mean, the goal here is to get as many members as you possibly can to conveniently go vote to maximize democratic participation. If you at least can argue that you tried your hardest and darndest to do that, you're smooth, you're fine, you're good. Now, the aftermath, this is where I think the Greens could actually work very well, because it's not as if they would be quick to push someone out and trigger a by-election so that they can be within the legislature. I think already the conversation is turning into, well, how can I best support the party from the outside? And then it's a matter of identifying which riding that they would run in. And then this could mean that it's a win-win for anybody, in that they will select the leader, but then they're also kind of selecting the next wave of candidates too. So the other three would reasonably be candidates, and so that they could be that team and those foundational candidates that take the party into the next election. And so, barring any sort of like major fight between these candidates, and even then, all four of them could very well become MLA candidates. Now, the fight would be which areas where they could potentially actually win would be the kind of the positioning, right? Like if you really hate the person, you're going to put them in an area that like they have no chance of winning, and then they're not your problem after the next election.
Yeah. Well, and it's an issue of compromise at the end as well, right? Do the candidates want to back away from some of the harder positions they've taken and compromise for the good of the party, or how does that work? So we will see. It's the first of beginning of kind of stories about the BC Greens. Oh, hi, Ophelia. How you doing? Just going to move you off here. She has many opinions about the political scene. I want to move on to the next topic here, which is electric vehicle mandates. We had automotive manufacturers meet with the new prime minister this week. They emerged from the meeting saying they are optimistic Mark Carney may, in fact, rescind or change EV mandates federally, the requirement being all new vehicle sales and light-duty vehicles, that's most people's vehicles, would be a zero emission by 2035. The hope, I think, from the auto manufacturers is the government backs away from that. In BC, there's already discussions about changing some of those numbers. We have an ambitious target of 26% next year. The province right now is around, I think, 19 to 22. It's stalled out 90% by 2030. Seems to be a consensus that we're not going to hit that 2030 target. And so BC considering changing some of those numbers as well. So let's start there. EVs feel like they've been a central part of the government's messaging on climate and climate change and Clean BC, Jillian. Can the government change the mandates? Can it fiddle with the numbers? Can it relax them? Can it do that without kind of undermining its environmental kind of plans? Or what do you think of the discussion around rolling back? I don't think rescinding the EV mandates is on the table for the BC government, but certainly changing some of the numbers might be.
Yeah, well, I think I do recognize I'm a big supporter of EV mandates. Obviously, I was working with the Greens when we put that in the first confidence and supply agreement. But the changes that the Trump administration is making are pretty unforeseen and really do change the landscape of EV manufacturing in North America. And as we've been hearing, our auto sectors are very linked. So I do think that there is sort of like a realism aspect to this, that it makes sense to sort of re-examine if it's actually achievable. That being said, I think we are starting to see a trend with the government's environmental policy where it's at risk of sort of being like death by 1,000 cuts. Like they removed the consumer carbon tax, but they didn't ask, okay, then what else are we going to be doing? They're falling short of meeting their targets. They're currently set to reduce emissions by just 18% by 2030, and the legislated target is more than double that, 40%. And transportation makes up like 42% of our emissions right now. It's a huge, huge portion. So they need to be asking, what else are they going to do if it's not an EV mandate? Is there a plan to really expand transit and make it more affordable or even make it free like the Greens have proposed? It makes sense to pivot in the face of changing realities, and reality changes really fast these days, but you can't just sort of cut things and then, ignore them and not replace them. You need to actually be thinking about, okay, if we're going to pivot, it's not just abandoning something. What are we going to change it to?
Especially as the government leans into LNG, natural gas, mining projects that can contribute to the pollution numbers as well. You're right. We haven't quite seen a reckoning of how all that comes together. Allie, the other factors at play here, Ottawa and Victoria got rid of the EV rebates, which was up to like $9,000 for people, consumer rebates this year. We've seen sales kind of stall out. Jillian mentioned the U.S. Trump administration's kind of attacks on EVs. Tesla, the biggest EV seller in some places, now kind of reputationally damaged because of Elon Musk. There's all these factors coalescing that have brought the EV kind of, and then charging stations and range anxiety continues to be an issue for people. So how does government wrap its head around all that? And should it, in your mind, alter the mandates, do you think?
Well, let me take a little bit of what Jillian was saying and follow this thread here. What she's saying is spot on. Like they looks like governments are pivoting away from what was originally the policy just based on circumstance. But that pivot also comes with potentially admitting failure, especially with an electoral base that most parties need in order to win. There is this like voting bloc, and I find this fascinating across Canada, that believes that in our own homes we should be doing something on the environment, that it is not just the responsibility of large corporations and mandating these larger GHG emission caps and things, that there is a responsibility of Canadians. And so given that personal connection to this voting issue, there's this base that you can essentially upset and you can't betray and leave behind. And so that's kind of my understanding of what Jillian was very smartly saying. But then there's this other growing sense amongst another voter base of this is all based on a dream that doesn't really match our current realities. And by that, I mean that there was a drive for EV because of growing gas prices, by design, of course. But now everything is triggered on affordability. So if the government can't make EVs affordable, then there's no hope of it being successful. There's a consumer aspect to this that the government needs to be awake to. while also giving them something else if they are going to take away that affordability piece with the rebates.
Mm-hmm. Jillian, do you think, I mean, the government's broke, right? It's like trying to scramble together and cut things all over the place to try and address the ballooning deficit. And it got rid of the carbon tax, so it's lost that revenue. Should it bring back consumer rebates? And where does that fit, do you think, in its hierarchy of, or its priority of spending when it doesn't have any money?
I mean, yeah, I do support rebates. I also understand the government squeezed and, subsidizing people's cars when people do have options like transit. Maybe I can kind of sympathize with the thinking there. On the other hand, I think in the rest of the world, there are cheaper EV models available. One really interesting push from the
China.
Sort of clean energy. Yeah, there's 100% tariffs on Chinese EVs. And Clean Energy Canada has some polling out that 60% of people don't want that because, I think our conversation about affordability has gotten usurped in the news by all of the trade stuff. But I think at the end of the day, affordability still is the number one concern of consumers and of voters. And I think, that's a federal government issue, but I think that that's a really important thing to look at because, we kind of have two conflicting policies here where they're removing those rebates because they can't afford them, but they're also prohibiting consumers from accessing cheaper EVs when they want them.
Mm-hmm. The Chinese tariffs on EVs are a fascinating topic that we could get into, but we are at a time. I think it would, in the context of the government's allowing BC Ferries to build in China because it's cheaper, brings in the whole conversation about Chinese EVs and consumer choice there as well. But not sure many politicians are going to want to talk about that as we go forward. Thank you to both of you for being here to chat with us about this, break everything down. Thank you for watching. We have more content on the audio podcast, so make sure you subscribe to that. And we will be back next week with all the latest in BC politics here on Political Capital. Political Capital is brought to you by Uber Canada. Learn how Uber and Mad Canada are reducing impaired driving at uber.com/homesoon.